already. I'm wondering if you can tell me sort of how the housing crisis is impacting you and your family personally.
Yeah, great question. So obviously I have a lot of multi-generational people within my family, not just in my immediate family, but outside. So I have a lot of nieces and nephews who are just in the beginning phases of their life. So they have, decent jobs, healthcare, Ontario Hydro, but they cannot purchase a home. It's with an average house cost right now sitting at $716,000. That's pretty unattainable for a young person. So it's definitely impacting them. That you also see some people who are wanting to live independently as they age, but not having that opportunity as well. So it's definitely impacting us. I mean, I was fortunate. I got a house in 2018 before things really went bananas. So I've been okay, but it's definitely impacting a lot of people I know and a lot of people in my family.
So affordable housing is, a big issue in this election. And I'm wondering what your definition of affordable housing is and how a conservative government would increase the supply of housing that is affordable for people that make minimum wage.
Yeah, so affordable housing is actually, anybody can look it up, but I think what needs to be clarified is the meaning of what affordable housing is. So I'm pretty sure it's 80% of fair market value. So as you can imagine, if the fair market value right now, if the average income or the average house is selling for $716,000, that's 80% of that. So affordable actually means what you can afford, but the people are not being able to afford it. So it's kind of a misleading term in a lot of ways. It should be whatever you can afford. But right now, for a lot of people, like you mentioned, on minimum wage, how are they supposed to afford that? So I think there needs to be a distinction between low income housing and affordable housing. So in terms of creating more, to answer your question about what Conservative Party will do in terms of affordable housing, we're going to be building 1 million new jobs, or 1 million new jobs too, but 1 million new houses across the country. So that's going to be helpful. I think the other key is getting government out of the way and letting people build. So we have some incredible people within our community who are doing great work and have been for a long time. They know how to build houses. They're ready to build houses, but they need the red tape removed in order to do that.
Yeah, that seems a key theme in the Conservative platform is, getting out of the way and enabling the private market to build more housing more quickly. But there wasn't, in that plan, correct me if I'm wrong, but there wasn't any point made about sort of how much that housing would cost and whether it would be affordable or not. So I'm wondering how you feel we can rely on the private market to deliver the kind of housing that low-income Canadians need and can afford.
Well, I think that comes down to a lot of relationships within the community too, right? I think you're always going to have federal conversations and you're going to have local conversations, right? A big federal overlapping umbrella policy is, we've got a plan, we're going to secure the future, we're going to stop foreign investors. That's a really key component. I just came from a meeting about that. We have a lot of people coming in and driving up the cost of our houses because of foreign investments, right? So we're going to really clamp down on that. That's not okay. The other issue is inflation. Right. So when you look at bringing down the inflation rate right now, the cost of food, I mean, I'm feeding 3, sometimes 6 kids a week. That's astronomical. Seniors on fixed incomes. So we need to get inflation under control and we need to have a long-term plan. I don't know that we'll ever get housing to go backward, but we certainly need to stop it where it is right now.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to ask you about. I mean, you've already mentioned the surge in house prices in Peterborough, and that's happened over the last year and a half. And that's been, a real windfall for people that already own homes, but not so great for people that rent or people that are looking to buy the first homes. And I'm wondering, you said that we probably can't get prices to go backwards, but I'm wondering if you think that we should try. Do you think that it would be good for housing prices to fall?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a housing crash or a market crash there is probably good for anybody. I don't think that's going to work, right? It's tough, right? Because then the people who have bought in this market at those prices, now they've lost their equity, right? So you really have to make sure you're not leaving anyone out, but then you also have people who can't get these. So I think, having the 5-step plan that we have where you're securing the economy and getting people back to work, I think that's really, really critical, right? Because these are complementary pillars that build on each other of how you get everything back up and running and getting people to get what they want. Another issue that I think is important is that the Conservative Party of Canada wants to do is our approach to Indigenous housing. And so we really want to ensure that Indigenous people are solving Indigenous problems and issues, right? So they're going to be forming the committee when it comes to Indigenous housing. And I think that's really important when we look at that.
You mentioned the 5-point plan for building 1 million new homes. Which of those policy planks do you think will be most effective in Peterborough?
I think all of them, but I think the access, right, to be able to build more. Right now, like we were supposed to have 2,000 homes built, right, by the beginning of August, and we haven't been able to achieve that. So I think there just needs to be a lot more red tape removed. I've talked to builders in this community across the board, some building sort of low income up into affordable, and they're ready to do the work. They've been doing it. Some of these builders have been doing this work for over 30 years. They know what they're doing. They know how to do it. We've got great sustainable models where you're using social financing like the Mount. So it's really that in a local level, it's about getting out of the way, letting people do what they need to do to help the people.
Mm-hmm. What role do co-ops and nonprofits and publicly owned housing organizations play in your vision for how to solve this problem?
I think they're critical. I think collaboration is key, right? And I think you have to always look at what the common goal is, right? And I think the common goal is to get people deserve homes. People deserve a place to live, whether that's through rent or whether it's owned. We all have to work together. And I think that's really the key component when you look at how we operate and what are we doing to support each other. Right? A lot of people want to say, oh, this government doesn't talk to this government, or that's a municipal problem, or that's a provincial issue, or that's a federal issue. And it's true. Like each level of government definitely has their own issues that they have to be in charge of. But we really have to collaborate, and we have to listen to people who know how to solve these issues.
One of the things that caught my eye in the platform was the idea to incentivize landowners to donate property to community land trusts. Modeled off of the way that ecological gifts are now treated. I bring it up just because you were mentioning the role for community land trusts or co-ops or nonprofits. In the platform, that's the only mention of those kinds of alternative organizations. The platform does seem focused on opening up the process for private developers. So if you think that the nonprofits will play a critical role, were you concerned to see that be the only sort of mention of them in the platform?
No, and I think, a platform, like I said, you're going to have a national strategy, but then on an individual community level for Peterborough-Kawartha, you're definitely going to have to pivot and customize it to fit your riding, right? There's a lot of Canada, a lot of variation across the country. And so obviously you're going to have a general overview, but hopefully what you can do here on your own level is implement those ideas and policy around that to make sure that people are getting what they need here in Peterborough-Kawartha.
Yeah, to keep thinking locally, is there anything that's happening in our community around housing that gives you a lot of hope right now, or anything going on that you think we should replicate or expand or really lean into?
I like that question. The Mount, I think, is really great. And I think Homeward Bound, I think those are two programs that jump off the paper for me when I look at sustainability and creating an ecosystem. And I think, we've talked a lot about tiny houses. I went out and talked with Dan Hennessy, and that would be a municipal decision for sure. And I think there's a lot of bylaws that need to be evaluated to do it. And I think obviously you need to look at the 4-season aspect because we live in Canada. But I think when we look at ecosystems and communities, I think that's really what we know works. So there's another model going up in the west end of Peterborough where it's commercial on the bottom, and then it is housing up top, similar to like how the Mount operates. So you're able to subsidize the rent prices because of the commercial income, right? So I think that's a really valuable model to be paying attention to, but also it's creating, again, an ecosystem and a community within it. So I think there's a lot of great opportunity here to help.
Yeah. I have one last question for you. The current Liberal government formally recognized housing as a human right. So it's not really clear how that's going to look in practice yet. So I wanted to ask you, sort of, what does it mean to you to think about housing as a human right, and how would you like to see that realized in Peterborough?
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think you're right. I think if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And I think working in poverty reduction and working with people who work in poverty reduction, you can't get to a job, you can't get to anything if you have so much stress of housing and food. It is a human right, right? And we can't, and it's a smart decision and investment to invest in people to make sure they have the basic needs of life. So I think it's really important. And I think the difference, is having a plan to execute that. I mean, we can all think it, and ideology is great, but if we don't have a plan to execute it and to support people, and I think that's why our job creation aspect as well within our 5 points is really important, because we're offering subsidization for employers to hire more people. The longer you're off work, right? So I think incentives are very powerful. I don't think punishing people works. I think incentives work. And I think a lot of our platform shows that.
Great. Is there anything else about the Conservatives' platform on housing or your priorities for housing that you'd like to share?
I don't know that this is about housing, but it is definitely my mission and I'd like to share it. I want to ensure that we have a mental health facility in this community.
Mm-hmm.
This is my number one goal for Peterborough-Kawartha. And I think it does tie into housing, because sometimes people can't keep their homes, or they can't maintain things if they're managing their mental health and they don't have somewhere to recover. And that's very important to me. It is very important to me that we get a mental health facility in this community.